No.
You good, Randy? Okay, we'll go ahead and open up the budget session for September 30th, 2014. We're scheduled to run from 5 to 7 p.m. We agreed that Public Works would be the first one that we would be discussing for this kickoff to the budget sessions. We did do a brief overview at the last meeting. In order to be prepared for the Public Works budgets, the packet that I gave you and handed out at each one of your seats does include the water distribution system ordinance, as well as the wastewater and wastewater collection ordinance, and also another copy of the capital improvements plan. I know you have it. It'll probably be the exact same one. I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the copy with them today. To kick off the start of this, in order for us to understand where the budget works, I know that in past years I've handed out the ordinances and asked folks to make sure that they were familiar with them. As you know, our ordinances for water and wastewater drive everything that Superintendent Page does to develop his budget, and it is developed strictly by ordinance. So to get us started, I just want to do a brief overview of some of the things in the ordinance. I know I'd asked everyone to get their questions answered with Kirk beforehand, so hopefully you had the opportunity to sit down with him or email him any specific questions that you had in regards to his budget. But what I really want to highlight to start this whole thing off is, if you look at, we'll start with the water distribution system ordinance first. So in your packet you'll find that 060491-2 water system ordinance. Just want to highlight, again, the ordinance is to provide for the operation, maintenance, expansion, and financing of the water system within the Charter Township of Marquette, for the establishment of fees and rates thereof, and for amendment of this ordinance in the interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the Charter Township of Marquette. Again, this is what drives his fees and rate structure, as well as how you move forward with expansion of the system. I know you have seen this many times, but some of the things that I think are key or germane to our conversation and we do the budget, if you look at page 10, part 5, system charges and rates, that the establishment of rates and charges, the rates and charges established for users of the public water system are based upon the township's best estimate of the proportionate cost of providing the services to different types of users. Keywords here: the board shall review all rates and charges at least once every 2 years, although we do it every year, to assure that all contractual payments and fund requirements shall be met, and that the rates and charges remain in proportion to the cost of providing services to different types of users of the system. And then it goes on to talk about the permit fees, equivalent use factors, connection fees, etc. The next portion of it that I think is, again, germane to our budget discussions for this evening, Part 6 on page 12, financing of the system. When you look at the narrative here, the water system shall be operated on the basis of a fiscal year that coincides with the township's fiscal year. The receiving fund is hereby established, into which all revenues of the system, after being set aside as collected, shall be deposited. Funds shall be deposited and shall be transferred from the receiving fund only in accordance with sections 3 and 4 of this part. Section 3, the following 5 funds are hereby established, which shall be funded by the receiving fund. The reason I highlight that is, in legal terminology, the reason that the ordinance is put together, remember, once you pass an ordinance, that's the law of the township. The ordinance is in place because it was required for us to operate a water and wastewater system. For us to secure the permission and the financing to move forward, you have to have an ordinance, and they tell you by state requirements what's going to be in your ordinance. When you see in legal terminology the word shall versus may, shall means you must do it. So when you look through these, the 5 funds are hereby established, which shall be funded by the receiving fund. It means we don't have a choice in the matter. They will be funded. And then to understand how Kirk comes up with his rate schedule and fees that he requests to operate the system, these things have to go in order. 1, operation and maintenance fund. Out of the revenues in the receiving fund, there shall be first set aside Designed Operation and Maintenance Fund, a sum sufficient to provide for the payment of the current expenses of administration and operation of the system and such current expenses for the maintenance thereof as may be necessary to preserve the same in good repair and working order. So the key here is that we have to first set aside money for the Operation and Maintenance Fund. Second is the Contract Payment Fund. You shall establish that fund, and it is to be used solely for the payment of the township's obligation to the County of Marquette. The fund shall be deposited after requirements of the Operation and Maintenance Fund have been met. So in other words, one, you put the money aside for the Operation and Maintenance Fund. Two, the Contract Payment Fund. After they have been met, the sum shall be set necessary to pay those contractual obligations when due. Third is the Replacement Fund. There shall be established and maintained a depository account designated Replacement Fund, which shall be used solely for the purpose of making repairs and replacements to the system if needed. Then, after provision has been made for Operation and Maintenance and Contract Payment Fund, that's when the money for the Replacement Fund is available. So 1, 2, 3, those have to be funded in order. Operation and Maintenance first, contracts, we have to pay our debt obligations, we have to set aside money for replacements, and then improvement. There shall be established and maintained an improvement fund for the purpose of making improvements, extensions, and enlargements to the system. Not you might set one, or you could if you wanted to. There shall next be established and maintained the improvement fund. There shall be deposited into said fund after providing the foregoing fund such revenues the Township Board shall determine. Finally, surplus monies. If money remains in the receiving fund after full satisfaction of the requirements of the foregoing funds, then at the board's option be transferred to the improvements fund or used in connection with any other project of the township reasonably related to the purposes of this system. Again, has to be related to the system. I won't go through the exact same thing for wastewater and water collection other than to show that, again, it's an ordinance to provide for the operation, maintenance, expansion, and financing of a wastewater system within the chartered township of Marquette for the establishment of fees and rates thereof, and for amendment of this ordinance in the interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the township of Marquette. Again, it's set up in the exact same way. When you look at the system, it talks about how the system charges and rates are set. Revisions in charges and rates may be made by action of the Township Board, which may be enacted apart from published ordinances as necessary to ensure the sufficiency of revenues in meeting the operation, maintenance, and replacement costs as well as debt service. Such charges and rates shall be made against each lot, parcel of land, or premise which may have any sewer connections with the wastewater system of the township. In other words, everybody shares in the same system if they have a connection to the wastewater system. And then in Part 5 on page 37, it's the exact same language that walks through the receiving fund is established, and when Kirk develops his budget, he has to fund operations and maintenance first, then debt obligations, contract payments. Third is that replacement fund. Fourth for that improvement fund, and 5 it gets to the surplus monies, which again, if there's money remaining available, could go back into improvements or operation of the systems related specifically to wastewater. And it talks about how any monies that we collect, if we don't collect enough monies, then we have to pull it out of the general fund because these systems have to be made whole. We don't have the option of not doing so. So the reason I bring this up is that it highlights how Kirk, when he sits down, these ordinances tell him everything he has to do to meet his obligations to develop the budget. It's important that we as a board understand what's driving his budget. Then, of course, the capital improvements plan. Now, we've discussed how that's going to look eventually as the Planning Commission starts work on how we do it. But if you look into the capital improvements plan, this was last year's 2013. When we have our new one in place, it will be updated every year before budget time. You'll have a copy of the new CIP in your hands before we ever sit down to have any budget discussions. But this is what we've got, so we have to use this. It talks about what projects are required by each department. Public Works has the vast majority of this. It talks about the projected costs, the need for it, and it ticks through all the things that he has developed into his budget the need for them, the amount of money, why we're doing it, and whether it's a priority project or not. So you need to be thoroughly familiar with what he's got in here. We've accepted this. We've approved the capital improvements plan. Each year it's presented. We agree that these are the things we're funding. When you look in your actual budget book, you see them in the backs of each of the departments, especially when it comes to public works, what he's funding, what he's setting aside, and why he's setting it aside. Our question as a board then becomes, when we look at the budget that he has presented to us, I've got a few questions that he needs to answer for us to get it started. Number one is, Kirk, in your preparation of the budget, do you have everything accounted for as required by our ordinances for both water and wastewater?
Yes.
And so our operations and maintenance, our replacement, our improvements, all of those things have been accounted for. Thank you. My next question is, for your capital improvements plan, the items that you've identified in the capital improvements plan as necessary for our future improvements to the system, have those items all been allocated for in your current budget as presented to us? Then my next question is, the board arbitrarily last year, as they approved the budget, set a 2% cap on rates and fees for moving forward, and the requested rates and fees that you have in this year's budget, are they within that 2% cap? Yes. Thank you. In that case, we'll open up then the budget session and find out if there's any just general questions for Kirk in regards to either the water or wastewater, and then we can pick one or the other and start to work our way through it. But it would seem to me that he did answer the questions. The budget has been presented. He did follow our ordinances. He did stay within the 2% cap for any adjustments to the rates and fees. You've had the budgets in your hands for approximately a month now. You've had ample time to get individual questions answered. Now, if there's any specifics that we want to go through, is there any general ones just in public works in general that any board members may have for Kirk? Pete?
Are we responsible for this? I mean, in there, you got 90 days. If we ever get, if you don't follow it, you can go to jail in 90 days and $500 fine. Am I liable for that?
I don't know. That's a legal question.
Township would be. Township would be the liable party for that.
So the township would be liable for the fines. He'd go to jail.
Well, it's, yeah.
No, as it reads in there, that's what it reads.
Yeah,
I'm just kinda
you
curious.
run.
How does that, I mean, it's in there. so
Most likely your administrator,
my
your
answer.
designated administrator of this system is the township manager.
Right.
So I'd be paying bars. But, realistically, you run it from the standpoint of township board members, you have immunity for your statutory acts. So if it falls within, if your decision falls within your statutorily provided powers, you have immunity for that. If you step outside of those powers and make administrative acts, you may not have immunity for administrative acts. So there's a fine line there. But as the ordinances are written, you'll see in the definitions when it refers to manager, they're referring to the township manager.
Other general questions for Kirk or Randy?
I think the biggest thing when you talk about 2% cap, if you go back to last year, we talked about 0.5%, 1%, or 2%, and 2 being the maximum. And being a board member and working with budgets in the past, fairly good sized budgets. When someone gave me a figure, I went for that knowing full well I may not be able to get that total 2%. And if I can't get that percentage that they're there, I have to start cutting back. And I have to be in a position to be able to indicate where I'm going to start cutting in that. Now, it's fine to go through the ordinances and that, but you also have to look what you're doing on a day-to-day and a week-to-week and month basis. So he went with 2%. which is fine. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the board now has to look at it, is it a reasonable one at this point in time to meet all the qualifications we're talking about? And when you talk about improvement in that, I go along with it, but this is what the board has set for the future. Now, it all depends on how fast the board wants to have those improvements done as to what kind of dollars we're going to put forward to them and that. This is what I'm thinking at this point in time. So, I have a number of questions. I'll be honest with you, I didn't get with Kurt. I had too many other things going on. And I've been going through this now for 2 or 3 weeks. And the answer is I sat at a pool over the weekend going through these things, looking at everything, making sure that. I have to sit with my son, who works with firms who handle wastewater and water, and asking him some questions, because he's had to develop systems for reviewing and cost analysis and that. Just give me some ideas on that. Again, it's business rather than a municipality. He had some thoughts on it too at the same time. That's my feeling at this point in time.
So unfortunately, you didn't have an opportunity to get your questions answered. Even if you shot him an email or called him on the phone, I'm sure he would have been happy to go through with you. Any other general questions or comments for Kirk or Randy before we move to one? Lynn?
I know Kirk has done a bang-up job at trying to put this together. I know it's very comprehensive. And I didn't mean anything derogatory the last time I made comments about how the budget was done. I used it as a, for instance. And I don't think any of us disagree with how it's done or what Kirk is trying to get accomplished. I think I have the biggest problem with the project, let's see, what are they called? In the back. I should have put a flag on them. The 2 breakouts, help me out, Kurt. Here it is. The water replacement costs, water system replacement costs and the improvements. I think this is a great way to tell a board how you expect to have things improved and replaced. I think it's a great idea to, I was going to say pigeonhole, but that isn't even the right, just dedicate specific funds for a number of years to make sure the project's done. With that being said, I understand that other things can come up that we've said in the past we've taken money from these specific accounts to do whatever is necessary. If we need to pull up a road and replace something, okay, maybe the ATS with generator will have to be put off for another year because we need that 100,000 as an example. I think, and I know Danny has kind of said this before, I still would like to see more dedicated funds for specific projects that we can say are, whatever term you want to use, earmarked or dedicated, I don't know. If we're going to go and try to work on 492's project, however big that becomes, whatever that involves, it's probably going to take funds from this. I mean, I don't know exactly what Kirk's long-term plans are because I love the oration. I don't have numbers with it, and that's what I struggled with. And no, I didn't have time either. I was in and out of emergency rooms all month, so I'm sorry I didn't get to Kirk. But I can't grasp this well enough, I guess, and I don't know if every year it seems to get harder to convey what I'm looking for and easier to say he's met his requirements, let's just pass it. There's too much of a gap between those two things for me. That's general comments, but the replacement cost, those two reports are the things I think I struggle with the most to try to get my arms around. Because they're like a slush fund, they're like a wish fund. We dedicate funds, we raise rates to accommodate that, and then we just pick away at it. You know, it's important, but it's not important enough not to do something with. And whether we come up with some kind of a contingency fund and use that and just set aside separate funds, if these projects need to be done, we need to do them. We need to dedicate that money and do them and not take stuff away from it. I think that's probably the basis of my frustration with saying, yes, this is all done. These are the capital improvement. I know I didn't look at the capital improvement right. I'm just as guilty as the rest of us that didn't. But it doesn't mean anything. And maybe going forward, it will mean more because we'll have to be more structured. Does that make sense?
It does, but it's the same thing you've struggled with every year since.
Yeah,
we've
and
been
that's why I
together.
said,
And
it's
that's
me.
where
I'm trying to.
My frustration is we come back to this thing again. If you would have sat down with Kirk, I think you'd understand it better. And part of it is that capital improvements plan. It does mean something. It means everything because that's where this stuff is driven from. So when we say, yes, Kirk, we agree with your capital improvements plan. What you've put in there is exactly right. And as a board, we agree. And then when it comes to the budget time, we say, we kind of agree, but not totally, and we send such a mixed message to a department head that he's operating because we told him we agree with it, and then when we go to budget time and we say we're not sure, and when when you categorize it as it turns into a slush fund because we pull money out and use it somewhere, that sends a really bad image. It's not a slush fund. The things that we do are on the list. It's not, we didn't take the money and then buy a new car with it. We took the money and we worked on one of the projects that was identified. So it's, yeah, we may have pulled money from one identified improvement fund that we've been setting aside because it's all in the same improvements fund, which as our ordinance states, you have to have an improvements fund and you fund that per our ordinance, which is what he's done here. Then if we have the opportunity to expand the sewer improvements by an extra couple of blocks because we have a need to meet customers' needs. We have residents coming in saying, oh, you're this close. If you'd only bring it back another half a block, I'll be on the system, and I desperately need to be on it. Well, it is a CIP project. We know that it's going to happen. We've agreed that it's important and it's going to get accomplished. But we can add 6 more customers who desperately need a sewer extension so that they can hook into it. And we make the decision that, yes, let's move it forward because we know that it's a project, we can move it. It's not like we bought something that we wasn't planned for. That money went into a project that was a clearly identified project that has been on the improvements list, that is recognized in the capital improvements planning. It wasn't a whole new project that we turned and started in another direction on, and I think that's where, you know, all we really did was reprioritized improvement projects based on opportunity. We've gone through it so many times. We can't lock up each one of these individual funds or we wouldn't be able to operate. If something came up, we had a bad winter and it went up by $130,000 in increased expenses. Now suddenly our hands are tied because we haven't set aside, or we just have a floating contingency fund. Then it becomes more of a slush fund than a project fund. I hope that helps. Dan?
Well, in the beginning of the year, we talked about this, and I remember, in fact, you agreed that these funds needed to be out there. So we saw, I mean, like the ATS generator, I'm sure, I don't know how many years that's been in play here. I'm gonna guess at least 3. And I don't know, I mean, it's gonna cost $100,000. I don't know how much money we have set aside for that. I don't know how much money we have set aside for motor control center, PLC upgrade. These are all improvements. Don't get me wrong, you know, the other improvements are important too, but at some point in time, aren't we gonna need a generator? Aren't we gonna need a motor control center? Aren't we gonna need a PLC upgrade? I mean, if these are things that we need, we should know how much money we have for them. Yes, we can take money from them, and we've done it before, But I think the idea is, I look at it and say, well, you know, we've been putting money away for 4 years already for the ATS generator. We should have $100,000. We don't. I don't know how much we got, $20,000, $5,000, $10,000. I don't know how much we have. So when the point comes around and we need to replace this generator now, where are we going to get that money from? Take it from some other else? We're robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, I understand that we do have important things coming up. I understand that the deal with, okay, we're going to extend our sewer service because somebody needs it. That's fine, but these same water system improvements have been in the budget year after year after year after year, and they never get done. Because we're constantly taking money from these, apparently, because I don't know how much of this $1,588,500 we actually have set aside for these.
Sure you do. We have fund balances that you.
But is the fund balance for each, what I'm saying is how much do we have set aside for the generator? I mean, you could say, oh yeah, we got $20,000 set aside for all of this. But then, so are we going to prioritize here and say, well, okay, I guess, geez, the generator can wait, but maybe we want to do the 492 tank site, you know, so. I mean, if these are important improvements that Kurt has figured cost for and how many years it's going to take and how much it's going to cost annually, shouldn't we know what's in there? I mean, other than saying that we need $1,588,500. Annually, we take in $145,850. How long have we been doing this? How long have we been taking money and putting it aside for this? And how much is in there? And what is it funding? I guess it's just my question, because at some point in time, every one of these system improvements are going to have to be done. So if we don't just have the money set aside, where are we going to get the money from? This is where we're taking money from for stuff that we don't have right now, that we need. So at some point in time, it's going to catch up with us. I'm just saying, you know, I mean, if it's so important and we have this set in there as an improvement thing, then we should know how much money to set aside for it. He budgets annually. It's there. So if I was to look at this and say, well, gosh, we've been doing a generator for 4 years, so that must mean we have $100,000 set aside for the generator. But we don't.
Sure we do. If we needed that generator right now, we have $100,000 and we could go and buy the generator and move forward.
And where are you taking it from?
Out of the fund balance of the improvements fund.
So then do you have $85,000 set aside for motor control? Do you have $50,000 set aside for
It's not like
PLC?
that, Dan. If you do that, we've had this conversation for 6 years. If you do that, his hands would be so severely tied, you would not be able to operate a municipal system like that. You can't put every one of these in a fund that is like, this is it, this is a locked fund and you can't touch it. When that's done, we'll buy this.
I never said
it's
you can't
not
touch
the way
it.
it works.
I never said you can't touch it. We have been touching it. We've been taking it constant. All I'm saying is, out of the fund that balance that is left in there for improvements, I don't know what the fund balance is right now.
Lois, what's the fund balance for on the water system for the improvements fund?
I don't have the current one,
Okay.
but I can run to the office again.
It's the same conversation that we've had year after year after year. We find out what percentage it is funded by, and that tells you, okay, we're funded by this percentage of what we need in that improvements fund. If it's not $1.5 million, we're not there yet. All of those things, we're not disputing. I mean, are you saying, you know, are any of these things we don't need? If you read this, you know, CIP plan, are these things that we need, or are they things that are required for us? Are they necessary for us? If we agree they are, if we agree that these are the costs, we know that it's a $1.5 million obligation that we need to set aside for improvements. We can't do it all in 1 year. What would that look like if we had to spread it out? $145,000. It's, you know, we don't dispute the need for the item, then I don't know how we can't look at the amount that we're setting aside and agree that that makes sense.
I think part of that is when you look at this figures here, some of these we've been talking about for a number of years, even before you came on the board, they were here. So the question is, has the motor generator or the ATS generator been replaced in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years in that?
That's
So
not a
we-
replacement, that's an improvement.
It's an improvement.
Yep.
So we got 4 years. So the question, I think, what we're struggling with, when are we talking about this improvement to be done and that? Because if you took out top 3 items, you're talking over $200,000 there.
Are you on the water?
Yes.
Yeah, is that water, and I'll help you answer that question, Ernie. What does it say in your capital improvement project request? He's got it in there, install an automatic transfer switch and an on-site fixed generator for standby power at the Cox Water Pumping Station. $100,000 coming out of the water fund. Explanation of annual operation, status of the plans. The plans and specifications need to be developed. He's got 20 years in there. He's amortizing it over 4 years to buy the thing, but the expected service life of the project is 20 years. So it's a 20-year project once we purchase it. It's about a prioritization. That's one of the things he's got here. The rank importance of project within a department is an immediate need. Well, if we need it that bad, Kirk should go and should we borrow the money and then we would just pay a little interest on the generator? Maybe. He's got it as a priority, as an immediate need. When we agreed to this, it's, why are we doing it? It has increased the reliability of the water supply. Well, that sounds important. It's about the prioritization and using that capital improvements plan. We don't dispute he's got it, and I think this is why I ask, and my frustration comes in, you guys need to sit down and have some of these conversations with him, because if you take your capital improvement project, look at it, talk about the need for it, ask him, well, if it's an immediate need, why isn't it in? Well, because we had other priority projects that we had to do and it shouldn't have been done. Will it go in next year? I don't know. I mean, that would be up to Kirk. I mean, you got in the CIP that it's an immediate need. When do you need to do it, Kirk?
Well, this does get adjusted every year, and if you look on the CIP, some of the stuff is not even in here because it's been completed already.
Right.
And, I have to budget the money. So in other words, I got a plan for the future, okay? And all of these things are not just things that I'm thinking, okay, this is a good idea to do. The DEQ requires long-term planning for both wastewater and water. And that's what I do. And then the Planning Commission, basically their capital improvement plan for water and wastewater complies with my master plan for water and sewer that the state requires. And then I'm responsible for the year-to-year budgeting of all of this, including the operations, which you recall was the #1 priority. But things change, okay? For example, you see Public Works facility is now not on either one of these improvements. It's been on there for a long time. And we were borrowing money, but I've had to spend quite a bit of money. First of all, I had to purchase the existing site for nearly $400,000, which we paid for in cash. Came out here. That's a big number. Plus, I've had to, in addition to the project, which has been, I think we're up to like $1.6 million, okay, that didn't include all of the communications infrastructure that we had to pay for out of pocket, and the furnishings had to pay for out of pocket. My point is, we have big projects that get paid, instantaneously, plus we borrow money. And if we hadn't been budgeting for this all along, we wouldn't be able to do anything. And again, this is on top of the day-to-day operations, which is the main thing that we have to do. And, to address Lynn's point earlier about, I've been budgeting at 5% contingency, okay? And last year, we had those huge legal fees. Well, that's the kind of thing that, okay, we were sued. We got to defend ourselves. Now, whether that was right or wrong, the point is, we got to pay the bill. And I forget the number, but it was a big number. And we thought we were done. We settled for $360-some thousand, I believe the final number was, which we're paying over time. So that's 60, 70,000 bucks a year, which I think is actually in the budget now. This year, guess what? Now we're arbitrating against our engineers for that project that we were sued by the contractor for. And as of last week, I think we're up to $50,000 in legal fees with no return. And, you know, hopefully that's going to end, but, you know, I can't say for sure. My point is, you know, I try to plan for the future, I try to budget for the future and today, and we pay the bills. So I guess I'm not sure what more, you know, you want me to do.
And I think that's why I wanted to start off with the ordinance, because it drives what you do. It drives how you end up setting fees. It's about, you have to have a plan. You have a master plan that says these are the improvements that we're going to make in the system. And everything else builds up to it. The ordinance tells you have to do it. You're required by law to do it. And you do. You've got a master plan that everybody's agreed is correct, that those are the things we're moving forward on. You put it into a capital improvements plan that says, here's the projects over the next 6 years, 10 years, whatever, that I expect to expend money on. Here's what it looks like, and they're tied into this. That's what we're budgeting for. Everybody passed the capital improvements plan. They all said, yeah, we agree. Those are the projects that match your master plan, which all matches our future vision of where we're going until we get to this.
Right. Well, then this past winter, which was, you know, this budget year, the contingency fund disappeared because, guess what? We had a contingency that we had to deal with. Now, we may be able to get the majority of our money back, but I haven't completed projects that are necessary to prevent that thing from happening again. So, my point being, you know, things happen, and you have to plan and be prepared. And that's what I'm trying to do.
And what you're required to do.
Right. Now, I'm happy to, you know, if there are certain things you want to explain differently or...
Is there anything specifically in the improvements that you have concerns about? Any one of those items that he has said as in the improvements that are required?
I can make some comments on that. I have added a pretty major item that I've split between water and wastewater, and that has to do with metering. I'm trying to switch to radio read, which is like a direct read of the meter that goes directly into the billing. When we purchased the fire hall site, you know, that included the tower, which I'm going to be able to use as the receiver. And the company's already looked at you know, they've done a propagation study, and we'll be able to read every meter in the township except one meter. But again, it takes some manpower to get there because I have to we've been replacing meters. That's been going well. We've been installing remote readers, okay, which will be interfaced with the radio transmitters. I don't have any radio transmitters yet. But we still are short like 300 remote readers that have to be installed before I can implement this radio read. So, but that's going to be a long-term project that, you know, I'm accounting for, and it's going to cost, you know. I've got an annual cost in there for each fund of $10,350. Some years we might spend more than that. The initial, like when I have to buy the receiver, that's going to be $20,000–$30,000. Then there's going to be a setup charge, and then it's basically these transmitters cost roughly the same, in fact a little bit more than a meter. But once I get the remotes on, it's fairly easy. The transmitter just clamps onto, you know, the remote reader, which is outside the house. Because in order to install these, we have to get access, you know, inside people's houses, which has been kind of difficult. So-
And because metering accounts for 2/3 of our revenues.
Right, it's very
right,
important, yeah.
It's really important. And right now, when we have to send somebody out to read meters, how many man hours does that take in a month?
Well, that's a couple of guys for, you know, like 4 days a month.
2 guys for 4 days a month.
Yeah.
And if we have these radio reads, they don't need to go out and do this.
Right, yeah. And along with that, and I've done this in a couple of other areas. I'm doing that with our lift station. I've actually got remote radio monitoring of our lift stations, and actually cell phones. But we got radio monitoring of our water pumping stations and our water storage tanks. But along with that, we basically contract with the company so that all the data is collected on their servers. So in other words, it doesn't come here, it goes there. So it takes out, we still do the billing, but you know, it eliminates a whole lot of, you know, the in-between the meter and the billing.
Of all our meters, there'll be only one that you won't be able to read.
Right.
I hope it's mine.
Ready?
I was going through that and I started reading that and looking at that, and I started going back when we had to fill out the forms and send them in. Then you went to the manpower to do it. It takes a couple, 3, 4 days to do all that.
Right, yeah.
And now you're doing this. And I started thinking about return on investment. What did it cost to go from filling out the card to the personnel that you have dedicated doing it 2, 3, 4 days a month? What that cost is in relationship to what you were doing. Now by going to this, I'm looking at the return on investment. You're talking, looks like, if I remember right, without going back a couple, $300,000 by the time you get this all taken care of that. How long will you?
Yeah, $207,000.
How long will it be to return that investment before we start seeing that paid for by doing this? Because you're paying for the equipment.
Right.
in that. So it's going to take some time to do it. Are you talking 3 years, 3 to 5 years before you, in essence, pay this off so you don't have to worry about it?
It'd probably take longer than that. Everything takes longer than, you know.
Yeah, and it's
anticipated.
just not payback through man hours, it's payback through accuracy of billing.
Right.
There was an awful lot of water that was not being properly
And
billed.
these are smart meters, so there's actually a lot of benefit. So we'll have more accurate metering. It's also, it'll be information that's valuable to the customer. You know, it's because it's like a real 24/7 monitoring of your use. So if your use jumps up, you know, it's going to send up a flag. Okay, there's something abnormal happening. You know, either you've got a leak, or you know, you left your hose running or something. You know.
Your neighbor's filling his pool while you're at work.
Right. I mean, you know, and ultimately one of the applications is shutting off water.
Well, and quite frankly, there were numerous occasions where individuals just didn't fill out the cards. They did not report their usage for months and months at a time, so we would do estimated billings, which would then cause our staff at some point when they came in to pay their bill to spend time with them, having to go back through all of their records to update them on what they actually did use. So it's not just the replacement of the meters, it's solving other issues as well.
Well, when you went to the manpower, you actually went in and read the meters, because most of us
Some of
now
them did.
have them outside.
Correct.
Which took care of a lot of these people who were not reading it and that.
Right.
I know you did find some
Oh, yeah.
Right.
that.
And it's still, you know, because we don't have enough manpower to do everything, we try to start like 2 days before the first of the month.
Well, and
Well,
there
the
were
first is
faulty
tomorrow, we
meters.
haven't even started yet because we're busy doing other stuff.
You know, the old meters were faulty, and, you know, there would be, unless you went and physically read them, basically, you wouldn't get a reading. So there was a fair amount of water that wasn't being properly billed and revenue coming in for it.
Actually, I think on the capital improvement, for years I did have, and I forget the exact number, but I'm thinking it was like $16,000 a year just for meter replacement. Okay, this is basically $10,000 a year for essentially the same thing, only there's more value to, you know, what we're doing.
But in reading your documentation, everything in the past, the longer the meters are in the house, the less accurate they become.
Right.
So
Those
you're
were the
gonna
old
run into
meters.
the same cycle again, and whatever cycle time frame that is, so.
Well,
Regardless
kind
of
of.
how you read them, you're still gonna run into that.
Right, except these are actually, it's a different kind of a meter.
It's not a mechanical meter
It's not a
anymore.
mechanical meter. It's an
Yeah.
electronic meter.
More
Yeah.
accurate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Treasurer Johnson. The old meters were mechanical in nature, and like any mechanical item, the longer they're in service, they slow down, they wear out, you're not getting accurate reads out of them. These electronic meters don't have that issue. You know, it's like incandescent light bulbs going to LED light bulbs. They don't wear out. You know, they're accurate, they're tamper-proof, you know, so you get accurate readings.
You still gotta.
I'm not saying they
report
last
the
forever,
flow of
but
water. So
I'm s-
you still gotta report, the flow of water is gonna come through something.
Sure,
right, yep.
it's an electronic measurement. Mhm.
It's the way of the future, though. Everyone's going to them, so
Oh, yeah.
more and more people are going to that.
I mean, basically, I was going to, I looked at this years ago, and I was going to telephone read, okay, which is a true meter to billing process. And it worked. But the problem is basically the company stopped making these, okay, so they were already switching to, in fact, they tried to sell me a radio read system, which costs more than, you know, the telephone read. But now, since they don't even manufacture or support the phone read, so I'm kind of forced into it. Plus, if I'd purchased the radio read initially, it was not an upgradable process, so now they are.
Yeah, and the rationale for the telephone reads fell by the wayside when people started giving up landlines. It required a landline, and folks are giving those up in favor of cell phones, cellular.
What power is this?
It's battery powered.
Battery power is on the outside the house, inside the house?
No, batteries as in batteries, little batteries.
In the meter itself?
Yes,
So what's the life expectancy of a
20 years. And there's a long guarantee on the meter itself, but you know, it's not to say that it's going to last forever. But and like I say, I mean, that's again, it's a newer technology. It's great, but the decision was made by business manufacturing people. I mean, that's, you know, industry made that.
No, when I read this, I was looking at the return on investment, how long it's gonna take to pay off what we're doing before we actually generate. But not being a business, I can't say revenue, but covering the costs of it.
Right. Well, it's the kind of thing, we had to replace the old meters anyway. You know, so it doesn't matter what the cost is or what the payback is. It's gotta happen.
My
Because the
meter-
old meters did decline in accuracy, therefore the revenues declined. And plus, it just generated 99% of our problems, our billing problems, are reads, inaccurate reads.
So that means, like, my meter was replaced 4 years, 5 years ago. Will that have to be replaced now with a new one?
Not for a long time, not in your lifetime.
So how
Nor
are you
my
go-
lifetime.
How are you gonna hook onto that for your reading then?
Do you have a remote?
I don't know what I got. I got a
Okay.
remote, I got something on that black thing on the
Well, that's what
back.
I'm saying. We've got everybody except for 300 customers have these remotes on the outside of the house. So all we got to do is clamp onto that remote with this transmitter.
Where does this battery come from that you're gonna have to put
It's in your meter.
already?
Yes, assuming you've got the new meter, not a new old meter.
I can't tell you that. All I know is 4 or 5 years ago they replaced it, so.
Probably one of the newer ones.
So am I the oddball case then, that I'm reading my meter and you're coming by and scanning it, and then you're sending people besides to read it every month? Am I one of those 300 that's getting,
I'm not sure. It could be.
You got the slow meter, so keep it.
no,
You say we're scanning it?
they're new ones, yeah. They're coming in asking to scan them every month.
Our people are doing that. So you must have a reader.
It's the new black box. They just put on it a year or two
Yeah.
ago.
Right.
And they're coming in and scanning it. I'm reading it, and then they're coming in and checking it
Okay.
too.
Well, I mean, if you're reading it, that's your choice. I mean, we're reading the meter. So all you need is the radio transmitter, which I haven't bought any radio transmitters yet.
These 300 that aren't done yet.
Yeah.
Is that the idea? Do we have a estimated completion time that we would get these?
No, I don't. I'd like to say by the end of the year, but
So there are some, because I know when they put my meter in, they said that I couldn't, because where my meter was located, they couldn't put they broke the water line and moved the water meter from where my initial one a long time ago was. So I still read my meter every month, but that's not a problem, but I mean, I'm just saying. So once these 300 are done, then we're basically gonna go strictly to the telemetry type reading,
yes. Yep.
except for those that can.
Right.
Since we jumped to water system, why don't we stay with water system and we're on improvements, why don't we just go all the way back to the beginning of his narrative and just ask, are there any questions that you pulled out of the narrative that you'd like answered in the water budget?
Question I have, and I was trying to find it in here, is interest. And maybe you can answer that, Lois. What kind of percent did you use? I was trying to figure it out, and I may have not figured it out. Were you 0.3%? That sound like a reasonable?
Revenue?
Yes, for revenue.
I'm not sure, what she used, but it's obviously very small. Probably-
0.3, if we get 0.3, we're doing good. And,
We dropped it last year, I think.
yeah, they did, because it was only 0.2 last year. We're up 0.3 now. And, so.
Oh, incoming or what we're charging?
No,
Or
incoming.
what we're getting
What
on?
we're getting.
I budgeted at 3.3
Yeah.
was my budget for revenue purposes.
Other questions from the narrative?
Question I have on water, 568, water system salaries, and goes back to third sentence. We have expanded our daytime service hours to better serve our customers, but our services have correspondingly increased. Have we looked at reevaluating the time frame when men are working? Because right now, we got two men or two positions off on Friday and Monday, and the rest are 410s.
Yeah, what I was trying to say there was, I wanted 2 people, but I couldn't make the 2 people work with the 2%. So that's why I'm requesting 1 person. But the 1 person will be working 8 to 5. So
When you
if,
say one person, a current person or a new?
no, the new person, the new person.
I think you have to look at what your manpower is doing right now, because I have not seen anything to justify it at this point in time, other than you say, we can't get the stuff done. I think you have to look at what people are doing, come up with some statistical information as to why information or why things are not being done, can't get done. Just to come up and tell me that we can't get things done, so we have to add personnel. I can't buy that at all as someone who has worked with budgets in the past and
Oh.
I've always had to justify everything.
Well, I think
Hold
one
on,
of the
hold on,
factors that
hold on.
needs, go ahead.
This is one of those questions that should have been asked before here, and I'll tell you why, because when he had this in here, I came in and I said, so Kirk, the board's not gonna approve hiring anybody. We can't justify hiring anybody. Why should we hire anybody? And he says, well, my narrative explained I'm falling behind in my system maintenance, and of course, we talked about one of the first things we have to do when we go through our ordinances, are we required to fund for maintenance? I said, what kind of maintenance? What are you falling behind on? And he said, he'll give me the whole narrative, and I'm not gonna go back through the whole thing right now. But if we aren't maintaining our system, then we aren't doing what we're supposed to do, and we're violating our own ordinances. So when you say I can't justify it right now, the question is, Kirk, what maintenance isn't getting done? What are we falling behind on?
Well, it's some of the routine stuff. For example, the new sewer project, okay, is a pressure sewer system. And part of the routine maintenance is flushing out the mains. And when we got the permit for the DEQ, they said because everybody's not going to be hooking up right away, we're going to have to flush the system even more. Okay, well, the flushing the system entails operating valves, providing a water supply, you know, and doing this systematically. And that's the kind of thing, that's a routine thing, and that's the kind of stuff that's not getting done.
Okay, so I don't want to put words in Ernie's mouth. It's impolite and unsanitary. But what he's saying is, then look at your scheduling. They're off on Mondays, they're off on Fridays, they're working 4/10s. Would it make any difference if they worked 8 hours Monday through Friday? Would you somehow have more time to get that routine maintenance?
Well, you still got the same amount of time. I mean, you know, a man hour is a man hour. Everybody still works 40 hours a week.
So that points maybe to what
And
nobody here
so
wants to ask.
the expanded schedule is great because, you know, in a 10-hour day, obviously you can get more done than you can in an 8-hour day. I mean, because everybody, you know, gets vacation, everybody gets sick, personal days, whatever, you know. So there's a
Sitting
lot
at the coffee shop,
of training.
walking through the grocery store.
Everybody gets a lunch hour breaks.
No.
This is what I'm hearing from
No, what?
people.
I drive by the Easy Stop enough to know, and I'm tired of seeing those damn trucks parked in there for 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time, and that.
Have you asked what they're doing there? Have you come in to talk to Kirk to ask why his people are doing that?
The same truck is there, the same different trucks are there, and Easy. Are they there? Do you have problems with Easy Stop? Do you have any work orders for Easy Stop?
These are the
2
kinds.
to 3 or 4 times a week.
These are the kinds of questions, if you're concerned about, that you need to come into the office and ask us so we can answer them for you. One of the things I'll tell you is that this township has grown 33% with no increase in staff. Now, you increase 33% in the business and residential community, that increases demand. We went to the 10-hour schedule to provide coverage later in the day, earlier in the morning, to reduce call-outs, is why we went to the 10-hour shift. I have a recommendation in the budget, if you've seen it, to avoid that. So, we are concerned about it, and we are addressing it.
Still coming back to the point of, maybe I'm too used to having to justify it as to what people are doing on an hourly basis and a week-to-week basis and that. Time studies. I've done too many of them. I've had to do too many of them. I don't like them. It's nothing but work when you do them and that too.
If
so.
you'd like to see a time study, we'd be happy to do one. No, nobody's ever requested one. Nobody's come in and asked the question. Nobody's asked me the question. You see me in the grocery stores. You see me in the stores around the township during the day all the time, too.
That don't bother me. You're on salary. It's no different than I was. You have so much work you have to get done, whether you get it done during the day or in the evening. Don't make any difference. You got to get it done, and that's all.
Yeah, and our staff basically deals with all of the businesses in this community as well. So, I mean, that's a question to come in and ask.
We operate the system with half the number of people that the city does, less than half the number that the city does. We have about the same number of miles of infrastructure in the ground. And yet, I can't believe we're even having this conversation. It's come back to, oh, we saw a guy, he wasn't doing anything. I mean, you want to manage people, then you're sitting on the wrong side of the table. You should be sitting on that side of the table managing people.
Well, and I guess I need to respond a little bit to this, too, because you've raised the issue. You're right. We have essentially the same amount of infrastructure in the ground that the city does. We have 7 employees. They have 34 to cover the same. Do they have more people? Yes, they have more people at residences, but they don't have any more infrastructure than we do.
You bring it up at budget time, and it's, you know, if you want to know what they're doing and you're driving by, you're a trustee of the board, walk in there and ask them what they're doing. Don't be afraid to walk in and look and see. Then say to Kirk, hey, I drove by the Easy Stop 3 times this week and I saw a truck parked there and I walked in and it was this service worker every single time I walked in. What's up with that? Well, he's on a break, he's on lunch. I mean, you don't know. You're throwing some aspersions out there that these guys aren't doing their work, and I find that just ludicrous. I can't believe that it even came back up again. We don't have enough guys here to get this stuff done. I mean, you forget about this winter when we had everything freezing up and everybody's working their fingers to the bone and working around the clock for us. And to bring this up at this time, I find it ridiculous. I think you should volunteer to jump in a truck and ride around for a week maybe and then report back to the board.
Okay, I have a question. When is a good time to bring it up? Because I brought it up before, and, you know, so when is a good time? You can't bring it up during board meeting. When is a good time to bring it up? If we can't bring it up now when we're on budgets?
Why would you bring it up right now? Why wouldn't you, if you saw
when
something,
is a good time then?
talk
That's
about
my
when it
question.
happened so that they can investigate? What specifics, what date, what time, what trucks, where were they at? Give that to Kirk and then he'll be able to answer
Okay,
your
being a
question.
township
But bringing
being
it
so
up
big,
now, what's he gonna
Why don't they
say?
have GPSs in their car to see where they're at so we can keep track of them? The little car places, Napa, they got them in their cars, you know, and it's true. I have people calling me, I don't know if the same ones call Lynn, but it does get, you know, what are you supposed to tell them when you got them calling you all the time and telling you this stuff? Then if you bring it to you, you guys act like we don't say nothing.
You say, call Kirk, call Randy and find out,
I
give
do,
me a
and I tell them to
specific.
call them you, so you can hear what
And
they
no
tell
one's
me.
ever called me, ever, not
And I've never gotten a call.
Well, I find that very hard to believe.
Stop into our office.
I'll find that
and
very
let
hard.
us know.
Get their names and numbers and give it to me and I'll call them because they're not
Absolutely.
calling me.
Well, I tell them to personally call you so you can get what I get. Because I brought it up before, you know I have. But I mean, I don't know when to bring it up. When is a good time?
When you
I
see
mean,
it.
being a board member, I see stuff myself. But when is a good time to bring it up?
When you
Stop
see
into
it.
the office and ask the question. Stop in and ask us about
Ask the
it.
question.
Please turn your
I've never
microphone
heard
on
it.
down there.
You've never asked me a question about it. You've never raised a question. In fact, you haven't spoken with me since you took office.
Because you get the same stuff.
How would you know? You've never asked. We've never had a conversation in my office, ever.
Well, it just gets frustrating when you gotta listen to the people, you're here for the people, and then when you bring it up, nothing brought up about it. We got these new vehicles, you can't put GPSs in them, nobody knows where they're at, if they're on lunch, if they're here, if they're visiting, having coffee, whatever.
Of course we
Do
can
you even know
put,
where they're at?
of course we can put GPSs in them. If the board wishes GPSs
I
in
think
the
a time
township
study should
vehicles,
be
we'll
done
have
too.
them in.
Then
Not an
that's
issue.
real simple. Request to put it on an agenda. We put it on an agenda, the board discusses it. If the board approves spending the money to put in GPSs so we can babysit everybody, we'll do it.
Well, then gas would be cut back, you would see a lot more cutting, you'd know where the people are at most of the time.
I don't have any concerns whatsoever with doing it because I know these guys are working. I know they work their butts off. Are there incidents where somebody isn't working 24/7? Yeah, I bet you there is. I bet you in every single profession across the country that's the case. I'm sure you don't work nonstop when you're at work. But we can't do anything about it when you report it once a year. How do we go back and investigate it? You said nothing was done. When was the last time you called and reported anybody and said, what's going on? Why is this going on? When was the last one specifically that we didn't follow up on?
And if I was to bring it up, what would be done about it?
It would be
Nothing.
investigated to see.
Nothing. Because
First of all, you gotta understand how the system works.
I know how the system works.
Because what you just said, you don't
I know what we
understand-
have to fund and what we don't have to
I
fund,
mean,
but we don't have to
listen,
fund a bunch
listen
of people that
now.
stand
Just
around and
be
do
quiet for
nothing.
1 minute. You don't understand how the system works, all right? If a truck stops, how do you know it stops? Do you understand how this thing works?
Yeah,
Okay, if a truck stops, who knows that truck stops?
GPS.
I know, Dan.
But if
Who
you don't
knows
have a
that? Who-
GPS?
Who's sitting
GPS.
there watching it? Who's
GPS
sitting?
knows when it stops.
Who knows
The
that?
GPS knows how long it stops.
I know.
GPS knows where it stops.
But
And when
someone's
it's-
gotta know and look up that information.
It all comes back in the computer.
Yeah.
I know, but someone's gotta look at the computer stuff.
And then what are you gonna do with that information?
Well, I guess maybe if you found out that somebody was stopping for an hour and a half at somebody's house, you'd question it. when when there was no real call there, or if somebody was spending an hour at the Big Boy, or if somebody was up at Target wandering around for 45 minutes, you'd question it. I mean, the problem here is not the fact that we don't think they're working. The problem is the impression that the people out there get when they see the trucks this way. And now you want to add somebody else, and they're going to come back to us and say the same thing.
What is the reason, what's the
Why
rationale?
are you doing it when I turn around and see somebody over there? That's the problem.
That's
If you
what-
had a GPS and I could prove to them,
Hey,
hey,
this is where they were on lunch
they
or
were on
whatever.
their break.
I can't prove nothing because I don't know nothing.
Get on the phone, call, you
Oh.
got your phone, call him, I'm asking why, give Dennis his name or Randy the name.
Well,
have the
I'll
person
tell you,
call
I'll
and
tell you the
explain.
problem I got is I look at the budget and I see, and I'm not arguing this, Kurt, trust me, it's nothing, but I see $18,000, over $18,000 a year budget for fuel.
For,
Almost $1,500 a month for gasoline. That seems like an excessive amount of gasoline. That seems like an excessive amount of driving around.
Well, part of that is because they're taking their vehicles home, and that was part of getting the new building.
But it's still in there.
They're supposed to be parking in the building every night and using
it's
their
still
own
in there.
vehicles.
I spend $600 a month on gas. Probably more than that. For my family, $1,500 for the township operations doesn't seem all that much.
well, could I get back to the subject, which is, there's a lot of work being done. Okay. What I need to know is, has anybody complained to you about the service that they're getting? Because that's the work that's being done that doesn't allow us to get some of the routine. And I'm not saying we don't do any, okay? I'm just saying we don't do 100% of the routine maintenance that needs to be done. Because we're responding to service requests. And there are lots of service requests. Okay, the 300 remote readers that aren't installed, that's not a service request. That's a routine thing that I'm trying to get done. You know, last winter was another example.
300 remote readers, are they in your possession right now? I mean, do you have them?
Yes.
Was there ever any consideration of contracting out somebody to put the 300 remote readers in?
Yeah, there is, and I do a lot of contracting. And I'll probably be doing even more in the future.
I mean, when it comes right down to it, when you think of money-wise, where you don't have to pay for the hospitalization and everything else and the overtime and whatever, is it cost-effective?
It depends on the situation. I mean, meters is one thing, you know, because it gets us in the house, okay. I mean, the original meters that were put in were contracted out, okay. So you've got basically a plumber-type person, you know, and that's all they do.
Well, I mean, I know that whenever we have, for instance, the water break we had up here on the highway.
Yep,
I noticed in the thing that everybody was there for overtime on it.
yep.
Yet Odavero was the one that actually dug it all up. We don't dig up systems
Overstar.
anymore, so.
Well, it depends on the situation. That was a major, if it's a bigger dig, they've got the bigger excavator. Okay, we got a small backhoe.
Right. But most of the big ones are,
Correct, yeah. On Fair Avenue last winter, you know, we probably had 4 or 5 occasions where, you know, they did the digging.
but when people say to me, and I'm not saying it's wrong or right, one or another, but Odavero's out there digging up the thing for the thing, and you got 6 guys on overtime. What are they doing? Well, during the
Well,
day.
I tell you, a couple of digs were in front of Ernie's house last winter. What would be your comment about that?
No, but I'm talking about,
It's the same situation. It was an emergency situation, okay?
yeah, I'm not arguing it's an emergency situation, but I mean, was there a need for all 6 of them to be there, I guess is my.
Yes, because it was an emergency. It's not just digging and making the repair. Okay, we had to provide alternate water
Right.
for some of the businesses, okay? We do the traffic control, you know,
Well-
we do the shutdown. You know, we provide the materials, and we're actually in the
Well,
hole.
Actually, a fire truck did the traffic control. Jumping back to the addition of this thing, you haven't actually budgeted in your budget for this additional person.
Yes, I did.
Well, you said add X amount of money if we get it.
No, I didn't. Randy said that. My budget includes 1 extra person.
Right. Randy.
And the overall budget is slightly less than that last year.
Well, I guess when I read this and it said, add for one, $7,223 for water, I'm assuming doubled at $14,400. That's the salary for one person?
For,
One person spread over all of the entities.
yeah,
Well, I mean, that really isn't
it
true,
was-
because if you look at the ASFE contract, that, for one person.
well, it was split
And a
between
starting
water.
wage at level one is $21,000. Take times 2,080. It's $21,000.
Well, Lois did the breakdown. I think that was,
Yeah, and it's $21,000.
Well, yeah, but I'm looking at add $7,223 for one person, which means double at $14,000. That's not $21,000. So I guess my question basically is running here is the fact that if your budget shows this extra person in it already,
yep,
then, and I'm looking at your total overall from 2014 budget,
are you on the water?
yeah,
Okay.
from your 2014 budget to your 2015 budget, what you're requesting is only an increase of $5,500?
That sounds about right.
You look through a
Which
lot of
line
those,
item?
there's a lot of decreases in,
Well, I know.
lot of his-
Right, and part of it's-
I understand there's a lot of.
And part of it's in the wastewater, so the wastewater's a little bit different.
Well, yeah, I'm just looking under water right now, I didn't look at the wastewater.
Are you talking in the salary line item?
Pardon me?
Are you talking in the salary line item?
No, I'm talking about,
The bottom
I'm
line,
talking about the bottom line and the revenue.
Oh, the revenue.
He's only predicting or asking for a $5,500 increase.
right.
which
And in the
would- which would
wastewater, I
give you a
think,
balanced budget with an extra person.
correct, yep.
But he's also retaining, well, not in water, but in one of the funds, not transferring anything into the general fund to stay within the 2%.
Right.
So if for the instance, this year you didn't take that increased person, just to say for an instance, you would be, how much ahead? We're saying probably, well, by the time you take hospitalization, everything included, I'd say probably, what?
You know, I don't
$40,000 ahead?
see that on mine. Where would that be? Do you recall? He's asking what the cost of that one person is. Where did you see the ad?
Pardon me?
You saw the ad, some number?
Yeah, right under, water system salary is 568.
So it would be one of those numbers, I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, and I mean, Randy had in his narrative that the impact of adding one service worker for applicable wages and roll-up benefits would be $42,770 or $21,385 to both water and wastewater
Yep.
budgets.
That's it.
That's for one person.
Yep.
Right.
Well, 21,385 for salary alone. We're not talking the,
No, that includes,
So that includes benefits.
well, typical 2,080, correct?
Hours.
2,080 for a year? Per the agreement of ASME, somebody at grade one, starting is $10.22 an hour.
Yeah, I guess I'm not following where, because I'm looking here, are you looking at you're looking under water system salaries, 568?
So the
Line
total,
705?
the total to add one would be $42,770 or $21,385.
okay, it'd be
split
the
equally
difference between
water and
Randy's number and my
wastewater.
number,
No,
whatever that is.
what Kirk has requested is in each water and wastewater, 24,289. Remember, the two columns that you've got here is I asked the department heads to project based upon no reduction in taxes as a result of the tax tribunal.
I guess what I'm saying is, what is the overall cost for one person? Including hospitalization, pension, workman's comp, the whole 9 yards.
42,000.
Yeah, go to,
42,000. So if, just saying if, the board does not approve your adding of one more person,
we back
you're
out the
basically
cost.
$35,000 ahead, correct? Approximately?
It would have to be, because if you already got it into the budget and it's not approved, then that dollars will have to be backed out, or it becomes available for something else.
I think you gotta split that between water and wastewater, though, that doesn't, that's,
Right.
that's
Yeah,
shared.
whatever the number is, yeah.
True.
So
So-
it's a
so-
$21,000 impact to water, $21,000.
Roughly
impact.
24 in salary, roughly $24,000 in each.
And my instructions
You're
were,
basically ahead $22,000 in each one if you don't hire this extra person.
my instructions were not to touch the wages. I didn't touch the wages.
And what was the money that you couldn't give to the general fund? How much was that?
23. I think it was 23,
No, it's 12,
well,
For each one,
just for one, for the
for
He
what?
gave it,
solid waste.
yeah, he gave it's in the transfer to general fund, is in the water budget. It was not in, it's $23,000 was transferred in from the water budget, but not from the wastewater budget. He withheld that $23,000 transfer in order to stay within the 2% under wastewater.
Correct.
But we really need another guy. Look at who we have right now and the age of our workers right now. We really need another person to start training and getting the knowledge that they have right now. For, you know,
My biggest concern with it is you've got your superintendent telling you that they're not getting the system maintenance done. What is the cost of not doing our maintenance? There's a reason you do maintenance. And what's the cost associated with falling further behind in maintenance?
I can't disagree with what you just said. I have to go back to, my original comment is, are we utilizing the manpower we have to the maximum?
I'd have to say
I
yes.
have not seen that anywhere that I can see it in documentation that it is being done. Because you really don't have any documentation to that effect at this point in time.
What could he possibly show you that would do it? You want a time study done, but you can't ask for it now during the budget time. You can't throw one out instantly. That would have had to been asked for a long time ago.
you got water. You got water, Ernie?
Pardon?
You got water at yours. You did a pretty good job on yours.
That's true.
I mean, we got a tremendous
only
amount
one
of
of 'em.
compliments this winter over how our guys were there and the job they did over the winter. I never got one complaint. What I got was compliments.
I can't argue with that at all. I'm talking strictly from a budget standpoint, and that's the extent of it, man. I look at, if you go back to the revenues, I've been looking at this now for 2 weeks, and it still don't make sense to me. Because when you look at your sales, Kurt,
Yep.
your actual through June was 335.87. I'm assuming some of that has to be with the lead flow. I'm not sure. Because if you double that,
We didn't charge for the lead runs.
if you double that, you got 661,614 coming in. And your estimated total of 776. So now if you take your 2% to what? If you take 2% of the,
The 2% is the rate, the per gallon rate. That's 2%.
but that's also gonna relate back to your revenue.
Correct. Yes.
My same question, Ernie, that I was.
And that's one of the problems I've had is projecting the use. Okay. Use in general has been declining. However, it jumped up in 2011. It jumped up to, what the heck was it?
Your sales jumped
then
up in each year.
Not every year.
Now, let's go back.
Because
if you
we
wanna
made
get
rate
back to that,
adjustments.
We go back to 2013.
Yep,
And why did you have a big sales dollar there? Because if you remember, we had the individuals come through and did the study, and we as a board increased the rate by X number of percent, and yet it did not go that high. And we retained that, I think it was 23 cents.
yeah, in 2011, we sold 89 million gallons of water. 2012, we sold 92 million gallons of water. In 2013, we sold 82 million gallons of water. All right?
282.
Yes. So what happened is there was a period of time, and a long period of time, where Lost Creek had a leak. Okay, the leak was not surfacing, nobody could see a leak. It's just that their use kept going up and up and up. And that's our biggest customer, Lost Creek. Okay, and they were paying for it. So, no big deal, but finally, with our assistance, we found the leak. And it's the kind of thing that was leaking over time, I'm sure, and got worse and worse. But since they were paying for it, it's not like, you know, we're losing water or anything. We're selling water. But then, they fix a leak, okay, then we drop back down to 82 million gallons. So what am I going to budget for next year? 82 million gallons? So what I did is I went back and took a 3-year average, which we might not make.
But it does start to account for some of the new growth that's coming in, whether it be the Phase 6 that Curran built down there and add those 2 new buildings, or it's the new facilities that are being built that are under construction right now here in Commerce Park.
Yep.
And we have new facilities coming on board, which are, you know, will they make up for that shortfall?
Well, hopefully. But in general, people are using less water.
But I'm just looking at trying to figure out 2%.
Well, it's a 2% of the rate. Okay.
But that, to me, equates back to sales.
No.
Well, yeah, it's
a
based
portion-
on
it's a
sales, but
portion of the rate, but it's not all the rate.
Isn't sales directly related to the amount of water you sell?
yes, but in that one number includes the base rate. Okay. So we charge, it's an equivalent, so like one customer, you know, 1 meter, okay. If you look at the proposed rate schedule, it jumps up, the bigger the meter, the more you pay. So we've got an equivalent number of meters, for example. Okay, so that number equals a pretty sizable number. The balance is the user charge per gallon.
So what you're telling me is the sales is not strictly sales of water itself. There's other revenue included in that sales.
Correct, yes. And another thing that's a big part of the revenues has always been connection fees. Okay, that kind of goes up and down.
But connection fees are separate. That's not part of that.
Right, but it's still part of the revenue. The revenue is
I
multiple
understand that,
components.
but I'm talking strictly on sales.
Yep,
That's where I was trying to come up with why there were so many changes, difference here and there.
yeah, because there are big changes. A 10 million gallon change is pretty huge.
But just using what you just said, that terminology, the water is one, then you have others. That's, other is over $100,000 difference between water and others to come up with your projected figure, so. To me, I'm having a hard time understanding, looking at water sales at one figure and other sales being over $100,000.
Okay, let me get to where you are.
I'm on revenue, waterfront 591, revenue 450, or what is it, 642. So what I need to know then is, what are you projecting the water sales versus the additional sales, whatever they are?
These are the kind of questions, when asked beforehand, would allow the board to function much better and move along a lot quicker.
I'm sorry.
I'm not in here to see how fast we can get through something either. I'm in here to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, Ernie, but the rest of us have to sit here because you won't do your job and get your questions answered ahead of time, and that's
The
frustrating.
job I do will be determined by me, by nobody else to determine what I want to do.
That's right, so the rest of us will suffer because you don't want to come in and do anything outside of
Why are we even here? I'm just tired of this. I'm here as a budget here. I'm asking the questions I want to ask now.
That's why we
If you
spent
don't like it-
16 meetings doing this.
I don't care if it has 20 meetings.
But why can't you do it like everyone else? I mean, half the board goes in and gets questions answered.
Because really, in all honesty, the budget is probably the biggest thing we have every year. The budget, if we're trying to be transparent, why would I go behind closed doors to ask questions that the public would probably like to hear the answers to?
Behind closed doors, so that you do your
No,
homework
no,
and
no,
come here with
no,
your
no, no, no.
information in
Stop.
hand.
Let me
You
finish.
asked me a question. You asked, why would I do that? I'll answer you, so that you can go and get your questions answered, and then come in here so that when we have a budget discussion, you can share your information with the rest of the board.
Well, why can't Kirk just share it? That
You know,
doesn't make sense.
it's why we have 16 budget sessions. The county, 4. The city, 3. Marquette Township, 16.
Isn't that what we're here for? To make sure that our money is spent wisely? Isn't that the
Right,
job?
that's why they
Isn't that
want
the
us to
job
go
of a
do our
trustee?
homework. That's how a board becomes a great board. 7 individuals go out and do their homework, and then they come together and are able to share everything they've
It
learned.
seems right now that 7 individuals are coming together in a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because because these 7 don't agree with one person, all of a sudden 5 are wrong, but 2 are right.
No, it's because we're spending a half an hour talking about
So what?
meters that we could have gotten through and probably spent 5 minutes, shared the information with the public. They would have gotten the
What were you
information
gonna
and
share
we
with
would
the
have moved
information with the
on.
public? Were you gonna just throw out about the meters? Then you could have done it. You could have done it. My question I have is, Randy added $7,223 to water system salary for one person. Is that above and beyond Kurt's additional one, or is that just something that,
Yes.
so Kurt didn't, in other words, Kurt
No,
didn't put
what I'm-
enough money in for
No,
salary?
what I'm doing is I'm indicating what the additional cost was for the budget. This is over and above on what I've got in my column. I'm referring to my column, not Kirk's column.
I agree.
Okay, in my column, the 123,779, if you're still on salaries full-time under 568, is what I'm allocating for additional cost for one position. If you go to 2 positions, as I suggested, I'm giving you background information here as to what those costs would be if you wanted to go in that direction. And that ties to what I had in my narrative.
So Kurt's money he had in his department request.
He includes one position.
Includes one position.
Increasing the
Yours-
131,002
Yours
includes one
doesn't include
position.
one position. Because
Mine-
because per your narrative, you didn't recommend, manager's recommendation presents remaining at current staff level.
Correct.
Correct.
So you recommend not hiring somebody else.
No, that's not what I recommended. I'm taking a status quo, basically. Kirk is recommending one, and I'm giving you what the opposite would be if you choose not to do that. That's what I put in my narrative. The 2 columns, side by side, give you a maximum and a minimum, depending on what happens with taxation. My revenue figures are lower than what the department heads across the board in all departments.
But in your narrative, the manager's recommendation presents remaining at the current staff level.
Correct. That's what my 121 reflects. And next to that, I'm indicating to you, if you choose to go with one, with the revenues that I have projected, that's what I account for the cost of that position.
Understand that, but I'm looking, your recommendation is to remain at the current staff level.
Current staff, that's correct, current staff level.
Kirk's recommendation is to add 1.
And again, I'm giving you the cost of the two options.
I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But when the manager makes a recommendation to me, that to me holds a lot of water when you're looking at it, because you're here all the time, so.
But under the circumstances, as we look at our public workers, don't you think it'd be a good time, knowing that we're behind on our schedule, looking at the age of our employees, it'd be a good time to take Kurt's recommendation and get another person in there being trained, knowing that you probably have one person leaving, possibly two people leaving in the future?
Well, I look at it from the standpoint as a budgetary wise, is that considering right now that Kurt can't pay back the money to the general fund, that we don't know what money is going on with our court case and everything else, that my recommendation would be to go along with the managers and say, maybe we should hold off one more year. If somebody is retiring, then let them retire.
Yeah, but I look at yours too, Danny. If the fire department were kicking a couple more dollars out of their transfer thing, we could do it, and also.
The fire department had money, they could do it. The fire department's
What's
budget is balanced.
What's your fund balance, Dan?
Fire department's money is balanced.
What's your
Those are
fund
Public
balance?
Works, it's balanced.
It's balanced with his recommendations as it is right now.
Well, obviously it isn't, because he's not paying money to the general fund.
The water is, the
Water
Water
is,
is, but the
isn't.
wastewater isn't, is it?
Well,
Well,
Well, and that's because of an artificial 2% restriction
Right.
exactly.
The board
on
required that.
rates.
yes, the board did.
And it was arbitrary, it goes against the ordinance. And I said it
We
last
haven't even got
year.
into the rates yet, and that's gonna be another one.
He held the rates to 2%.
Did you get your question answered, Danny?
He's not there.
Get your question answered?
Yes, my questions are answered. No problem. That's all I had.
Ernie, what was your question? I forgot already. Sorry.
Which one?
Your last one.
About sales.
I think on the sales is, I was trying to go through and utilizing water as the primary
Yep.
revenue.
Great.
And you're telling me it's there, but there's additional revenue coming in that's part of that total cost or total sales. I don't know what that is, but when I look at.
Well, it's the base rate, which I'm suggesting to be raised from 6 to
I
7.
understand, but you said there's other sales.
That is the other.
Okay.
That number is only two parts, the base rate plus the per gallon rate.
I don't know how much dollars that base rate brings in. Because you have to be
Yep.
the number of
I
people,
can,
a number of entities, I should say.
Correct.
because
Yep,
some of
I
them
can give you
have
that number.
Different levels.
yep. I don't have it right in front of me, but I can give you that number.
Because that will make, what figures I got here don't mean anything anymore.
Plus, the use, again, that's a projection.
I know it's a projection, but
You know, up until this year, I've been pretty much looking at the previous year and, you know, the first half of the current year. And sometimes I go back maybe 2 full years, you know, mid-year to mid-year, 2 years. This year, it's totally different because first there was a spike up, then there's a spike down. And I'm talking yearly totals. So, for me to go with last year's number, I don't think would be,
last year's
Reasonable.
number on sales total,
yes. Should I go with the year before last? I don't think that's reasonable either. So I'm trying to keep to the middle ground, and I could be totally wrong. 2000, right after we put the well system in, you know, 2007, 2008, we were selling 92 million gallons a year. Okay, then it took a nosedive and kind of tapered off.
a lot of that has to do with weather too.
Weather's got a huge,
Major factor on it.
Huge impact.
exactly right, yep. But more and more people now are putting in lawn meters. Okay. It hasn't been this big onslaught, but I've noticed, it used to be just like the big box stores, basically, and the newer stuff that had, you know, they were, for some reason, watering those little green strips in the parking lot, you know. And they were pouring a lot of water on it. And Lost Creek was doing the same thing. But now, the last couple of years, even Trowbridge Park, okay, existing older houses, you know, people are putting in, you know, are watering their lawns and paying for a lawn meter. So, my point being,
Don't you also, you charge them for the utilization of that water that they use, right?
oh yeah, they pay for the water, they just don't pay for the sewer on the amount of water that's not going into the sewer.
Yeah. When we get to the sewer, that's something else, but strictly
Right.
talking about water.
Yep.
Either way, they're paying for the utilization of water.
Correct, yes.
So regardless whether it's.
But overall, in general, use per capita is like declining. And that has to do with a lot of factors. Number one, I mean, just the plumbing codes require, and manufacturers only make, you know, they're getting more and more water use restrictive, you know. It's hard to buy you know, a fixture now that's, you know, that's not limited in the velocity of water coming out.
Aren't they all the new homes have to have the water
Right, yeah,
restrictions
that's
in
what I'm
them?
saying. So even the older homes, people are, you know, they're just replacing. Another thing is, if the rates go up, that tends to encourage people to use less water. But again, these new meters, when I can read them, okay, is going to make this a lot easier too. A more accurate picture of exactly what's happening.
Now, looking at those projected new meter, the electronics, is there any data out there from other communities who went from a system, say like ours, to that, as far as additional revenue because if things were not being read correctly or read less? Is there any data out there that shows that you may generate additional dollars by going there?
Yeah, there's data out there, and it's not a huge number. Like I said, it's kind of a complex picture, but basically it's additional data. Okay, so you have a better picture. But another use is, okay, there's always the amount of water you sell, you meter, versus the amount of water that you know you're producing. You know, you're pumping either out of the lake or out of the ground. And that's another thing that we're starting to realize now. Lost Creek is a good example. Okay, in that case, we were able to meter it, but the leak that we had on 41, you know, was from the original system, which is older, but it had the newer pipe, you know, the thicker ductile iron, which nowadays, you know, we in the state of Marquette, I think, are the only two communities in the region that still require the thicker wall pipe. Again, the industry's changing to thinner wall. You know, they're re-engineering everything so that they use less materials, you know, so there's less weight, it costs less because everything's so competitive. Not to say it's an inferior pipe, but, you know, you're going to have corrosion. So the thinner your pipe, the sooner it's going to corrode. On 41, because we have not had, you know, since 73, 74, a break of that pipe. We've had breaks on 1950s pipe and earlier 1970s pipe, but not the newer pipe that we installed. So this was like kind of unusual, but it wasn't a break per se. It was improperly bedded pipe. So it's supposed to be bedded in, you know, sand, compacted sand, and there were just a couple of stones, you know, that were underneath the pipe. So over time, and it's probably been leaking for a long time. So in 2013, when we did that reliability study required by the DEQ, that's one of the things that they discovered was we are losing more and more water, and the water that we're losing is in the older system. So these things are going to be happening more frequently, which again is another reason, you know, it takes time to deal with those things. Not to mention the fact that it's water that's, you know, being unaccounted for, I'll put it that way.
Next question.
I have one question on, we're in a new building up there, and I'm looking at the cost of electricity this year, and I have to say probably through half of this year was over in the old building and that to a certain extent. I don't know what the breakdown is. I'm just wondering if you budgeted too little for electricity. But then again, I don't know what kind of savings you anticipate on electricity
Right.
in that
It
building.
was kind of difficult. What I tried to do on all the utilities was basically we had the garage and we had the Cox pump station. Those were the two primary places where we had people and equipment, you know, the heated areas. We had it in other areas as well, but those were, I basically doubled that, and maybe I was too low on the electricity, but I was looking at the gas, and the gas was pretty high.
You kept the gas about the same, and your usage for natural gas is a little over 4,000.
No, I don't think it is the same, is it?
I'm looking at the garage, 580 would be 924, the natural gas.
Okay.
So that's natural gas, that's strictly for the garage, I'm assuming.
Yes,
Say 580,
if it's under that activity, yes.
924 on natural gas,
under 580 garage.
yes.
Well, that would have been the old garage. 11, 12,
Looking
13.
at the actual through June,
Right, right, and that's where I came up with the 8,000, but, okay, if you look at the prior years, I mean, like this year, I budgeted 2,000, and we haven't even been 1,000 for the prior 3 years.
I looked at that backwards. And I'm
Now, there's no
assuming
doubt that we weren't in there physically, but the contractor was in there.
Right.
And then plus, we did move in, even before the contractor's finished. So my point is, it looks like a real number, and that's quite a bit more than we've been paying.
I mean, with the contractor in there, they may have used more natural gas than you would.
Maybe.
use in that, too.
Maybe.
And you've got a much larger space as well.
Not all the, we've got some new, not all the heaters were replaced, so there's still some, the older. Plus,
I understand that.
it's
I
a bigger
was just wondering
space, and
if that would be sufficient, or you don't really know yet because you don't have any historical data to.
well, right.
Yeah, we'll be approaching that same as we did these buildings as we go along. Lois is getting the bills, and we'll make adjustments as we go along. But some of this is projection.
Yeah, right now, for sure, it's a projection.
So I'm concerned about some of the repair and maintenance accounts that you're dropping a lot lower. And I'm hoping that you're not doing that just to balance the budget, but if you see something with the Cox tank or Ridge or Northwoods, that's, yeah, Northwoods too is 300. Thousands of dollars of decreases that I'm just wondering about.
Well, it depends, which one in particular? The Cox tank,
If you start, yeah, with the Cox tank.
last year we had the big project.
Is that's what I'm wondering, is that why?
Right.
Some of the things we've done, because almost every account is lower.
Right. The tanks I can predict pretty well. Some of the other stuff, like the service lines and even the mains and hydrants, it's like one year might be big, the next year it's not so big, so I just try to go with a median on that kind of stuff. But that's, again, that's, you know, it's starting to look like, you know, the water main repairs might be increasing again. For a few years, you know, we had two really old mains on the Fair Avenue going to the school. We finally replaced that. And then on Grove Street, when we built our new water system, we connected to an existing main. And we were having, you know, a break a year, you know, for like 3 years, so we replaced that. But now I'm stuck with all the other mains that are starting to, we've only had one, but, you know, where there's one, you know, it's the kind of thing that doesn't get better with age. All the breaks that we've had up until this year, they've not been main breaks. They've been, other than the real old mains, have been service lines. You know, they break sometimes at the main, sometimes at the property line, the curb stop. But this was the first year we'd actually had a main break.
Is that one of your
And I
oldest
know
ones?
we're losing water in that old system, so.
Is that one of the oldest mains, or that doesn't have anything to do with
Well,
it?
the majority of our mains were 73, 74.
Okay.
And again, it was caused by improper insulation, but, you know, how much improper insulation was there? I mean, I wasn't there watching, so can't say. It's my understanding the township hired a local person to do the inspection on that job, so. I don't know if he was a relative of the supervisor or exactly what it was.
When,
Early 70s, 73, 74.
40, 41 years ago.
Yeah.
only water mains we had was on the highway back then.
No, the Trowbridge went in at the same time.
73?
Yeah,
No.
it's 74. I mean, it's over a 2-year period.
The water didn't go in Trowbridge until 1991.
No, that's a sewer that went in 1991.
See, the water on Trowbridge, on Fair Avenue was there from.
Right, Fair
56,
Avenue was
58.
there since the 50s.
Because of the school. The line was run for the school.
But the rest
when
of
it
Trowbridge
opened.
was 73, 74. Same time as the US 41. US 41 also got sewer at the same time, but Trowbridge sewer didn't go in until 1991.
It's going back too far.
Yeah.
And then we replaced Fair Avenue water, I forget the year, late 90s maybe, early 2000.
That was part of the main one we did was part, what, 2005 was part of the water project, I think, wasn't it, the most recent section?
Well, actually 2 or 3 years after we did Grove
Yeah.
Street. Because I didn't think it, because that had gone in the 70s, so I thought, we didn't put it in, but I assumed it was like the newer pipe. It wasn't the newer pipe.
No.
So it's one of the ones that we basically inherited from the city. So after, I think it was 3 breaks, at like 10, 15,000 bucks a break, I decided to replace it.
Next question?
Contingency? You're going to 57.
Yep.
Is that, are you kind of banking that maybe for the legal, or did you have something else in mind?
No, it's
Just kind of a guesstimate
5%,
of what? I
the
couldn't-
total,
Of the total budget?
yeah.
The total revenue? The total?
Either way,
yeah, 'cause
expenses
it's
or
balanced.
revenues.
Okay.
Exactly, expenses. So that's, in other words, that's basically the last number I do.
Okay.
So it's everything else plus 5%.
After last winter, we got all the different equipment we need for if we have another hard winter this year.
We got the equipment, like I said, there's, I think it's 2 service lines to insulate and part of a main to insulate yet.
More of a remediation.
Right. Or preventative medicine. Because the chances of having another incredible winter are exactly the same as they were last year, so.
Completely unknown.
Right.
Where do we see the discussion of 492? Does that become a work session or board discussion or budget, or where do we talk about what we're gonna do up there, or if we're gonna do anything, or?
Which project were you referring to?
Well, the Mason's Bluff, or,
Oh.
expanding the system, how
It's,
do we work into that?
It's been a project that's been on the books and moving forward forever as far as setting aside money and wanting to go. Because of the obvious issues that were resolved around it, everything's been put on hold. But now that the bank is basically the developer and owner, and they're ready to go. In fact, I got an email yesterday. I did meet with legal counsel 2 weeks ago because there were many things pending that were stopped throughout the entire, as the first developer was going through a legal process. Those loose ends are now being tied up by municipal council, and as soon as those things are cleared up, it will become an agenda item to talk about the time frame and what we're doing. But that is why, I mean, you continue to set money aside to be prepared for that project. If you recall, the Mason's Bluff is one part of an overall expansion that included the second phase of the DWRF. Mason's Bluff can come online without the completion of the entire DWRF project, and that's why he's continued to work towards it. If we had a developer who had actually been active, it probably would have already been online at this time, right? But we've been meeting with the principals now and continue to do so, and as we move forward, I mean, that project could be on the table maybe as early as next year at some point. So yes, it will be an agenda item to discuss where we're heading with.
Yeah, and they are on a time frame as well, because legally they can only sit on the piece of property for so long before they have to do something with it, and that time frame is quickly coming to an end.
Yeah, quite a bit of money's been spent for that development, and most of it's been spent by the developer. We now own a water main that's empty, and we've got one test well that's not even on our property, that the health department permitted as a type 1 well, or type 3 well, to serve the one existing house. But there are actually other people that own lots there and have owned lots for a while. And they call me at least once a year saying, you know, where's the water?
And that's the part that's
And
ready to
now I'm
go.
starting to get calls from realtors.
Got people want to
saying,
buy lots, but they don't want to buy a lot
where's
until
the
they
water?
know what the time frame is of when the water will actually be available, which I'm sure you can understand if you're looking to build.
Or what, about 100,000, you say, in taxes, Randy?
Potentially, yeah, potentially, with
But that's the
with
part
all
of
the
the
lots
project
developed.
that's okay to go. It's not gonna take any more.
We're geared up. It's a matter of, that's why we met with municipal council to discuss, okay, there's some easement things. There's a property purchase that was left hanging out that it's a board approved to move forward, but then was just never executed. So we have a purchase agreement ready to go. So those are the things that we really need to now trigger and get prepared to move. And Kirk's, we've got one permitted well there, but I think we need to have 2 wells to have.
Yeah, actually, the well that's there is a test well, so they'd have to be converted to a production well. Then would need a,
But only one is.
And then we have
To
a lot
put in a
there that's
second
been
production well.
identified that for the pumping station, one of the lots that's platted in that subdivision is actually for our pumping station. And we haven't executed, I don't think we've purchased that lot actually, but
Right.
it's part of the same deal that we agreed with the developer, and the bank that holds it now has agreed to honor that same thing where we're doing that, honor the original, split, cost share between the township and the developer to move it forward.
And
And I've-
that type 3 well that's there now is not convertible to a production well, is it?
It is convertible.
It could be converted, okay.
Yep. But then
We're
the
talking
mains,
about-
the
talking
mains
about-
that have been empty for several years now, there's only like one segment that's live, and that's to serve the one house. So the mains would have to be basically flushed and retested, and it's not a huge cost. And then build a pump station. So, and I have met with the DEQ because we actually submitted a permit application back in whenever it was, 2008 maybe.
I think it was 8.
Well, the system would require a tank. Mason's Bluff, as a standalone, would require pressure tanks inside the pump station. Right, but there's no fire flow at this time. To get the fire flow, we'd have to do the Morgan Meadows project.
Chapel Ridge tank can't feed Mason Bluff?
It could, but then there's no main between,
Yeah, we have to run
so that's
that.
another, that's over $1 million to do that.
We got rock to deal with too.
Mhm.
right?
But
Lots
that
of
would
rock.
be, see, that would be part of the Morgan Meadows project. So I'm not recommending going ahead and doing that main. I'm recommending finish the wells and put the pump station in to serve Mason's Bluff. And then, when we do the phase 2 of our well project, our other well project, there will be another tank farther up 492 that the Morgan Meadows wells and Mason's Bluff wells would pump to.
And
and
then
that's
that
when-
would then get extended down 492 to
Correct,
connect to
yeah.
Chapel Ridge.
And back, right.
Right.
Yep, yep.
And when we originally were talking about the wells there and wells in Morgan Meadows and that, the ones up, what you're talking about right there, that was a supplement, which is, I think, a little over 100 gallons per minute at that point in time.
Mason's Bluff, yes, correct, yeah.
Mason Bluff. So I
Yep.
don't know if that's sufficient to satisfy the number of homes they're talking about or not up there.
Oh, yeah, no, it's more, and that's why,
Is it?
that's where the 80/20 came from.
It's actually 300 gallon a minute, isn't it?
No, it's like 130 gallons.
Is it 130?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So we're feeding Chapel Ridge right now with our well field.
correct, yep.
And when we do Mason, if we do Morgan Meadows, that'll be feeding Chapel Ridge also? Or
No,
Well, there'll be a new one, there'll be a new tank.
yep,
our own tank?
Yes.
yep. So Morgan Meadows and Mason's Bluff would pump to another tank, which would be farther west on
So
492.
Chapel Ridge is just basically feeding Chapel Ridge.
Well, no, it would still be feeding the township down to here, basically. Well, actually, over to Public Works Building. And then the Morgan Meadows, Mason's Bluff tank would feed Chapel Ridge.
Yep. The other connection I think that you had in mind, Trustee Pompa, was the connection between the, I think it was Northwood's tank and the Cox tank, basically to be able to serve Trowbridge. How was that set to loop the whole system?
Well, to serve Trowbridge, Trowbridge would still be served with the Cox tank, but then
Mhm.
everything would be coming from the west.
Correct, from Morgan Meadows,
Morgan Meadows,
Chapel Ridge.
even before Chapel Ridge. The unnamed tank,
Yeah.
492 tank, Chapel Ridge,
Connected to
Northwoods, Cox. But to do that, we would need more wells than Mason's Bluff and Morgan Meadows. On a
that's-
continuous basis, we could do it,
So obviously, when we get to that point, if we want to get to that point, we're going to need a lot of pictures and diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
And a big sales job to the people. They're the ones that turned it down last time.
Get through roads first.
And that's 7. See you tomorrow, 5.